So my first question is, how are you and the president building an economy that provides an opportunity for all?
So let me start by thanking Donald Boone for that introduction and being here. He is one of the almost 50 entrepreneurs that I invited to my office at the White House last summer to talk about their work. And so I could listen to them and learn what we needed to do to get the word out about what we are doing. And this economic opportunity tour, as much as anything, was born out of that, and then a dinner that the three of us had at my house, and is therefore about being on the road to let folks know what is available to them in the spirit of understanding we have so many entrepreneurs. We have so many people who have incredible ideas. They are innovative, hardworking, ambitious, have aspirations, have vision. None of that we lack for in the community. But for most folks, we lack access to the resources that will feed those ambitions and those aspirations. I chose Atlanta to be the kickoff for this economic opportunity tour for many reasons that include one of the leaders who is among us, and I would ask us to rise and applaud him, and that is Ambassador Andy Young. Who is here with his wife, Caroline. And I will tell you, as a point of personal privilege, Ambassador Young has been an advisor to me, a mentor to me, and a friend, and has always talked about his vision, his shared vision with Dr. King, about the vision for America that included a vision that was about fighting for civil rights and understanding that to achieve true equality, we have to also have an economic agenda. And that agenda must include speaking to people's ambitions. That yes, everybody wants a job, and President Joe Biden and I are very proud that in our administration we have brought Black unemployment down to historic lows. But that's a baseline. We also are focused on something Ambassador Young has talked so much about, which is creating opportunity for people to build wealth and to thereby not only strengthen their family, Donald Boone talked about that, but strengthen the economy of the community as a whole, and everybody in society benefits. So that's why I'm here, and to talk about what we have done, whether it be an extension of the work I did in the United States Senate to get $12 billion more into community banks, or the work that we have done, and you heard the panel earlier today, that is about uplifting our capacity through the Treasury Department. I want to thank Secretary Yellen in her absence for what she has done to be a partner to me around focusing on a number of issues that are about access to capital, but with a focus also on minority-owned businesses. And then what we did to create the Economic Opportunity Coalition, which is, Bank of America, Wells Fargo Bank, Google, and getting private equity to invest in community banks, some of the local community banks being represented here, to increase access to capital so that our entrepreneurs in the community have a place to go where it's the people who are doing the lending know the community, know the capacity of the community, know the mores of the community, and can provide not only capital, but the knowledge that so many need to understand how to run a business. You have a great idea, but you don't necessarily know how to run a payroll. Don't necessarily know what kind of system there is for business taxes in a way that allows you to maximize, your resources. Don't necessarily know how you're going to keep up your inventory, and don't necessarily know what is available in terms of creating access to markets. So you have a good product, but you need access to markets. So the work that we have been doing over the last 3 years has been focused on all of these areas, and also understanding the context in which we exist, which is the longstanding disparities. And understanding that in spite of those who in certain parts of our country want to attack DEI, we understand that you can't truly invest in the strength of our nation if you don't pay attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are, for example, paying attention to the fact that in order for any family or individual to have economic well-being, much less the opportunity to create wealth, we need to take into account the history of, for example, the ability of Black folks in America to own a home. Let's go far back enough, we can go even further, but let's go far back enough to remember the GI Bill. That was a promise by our nation to invest in who we called the greatest generation, who fought in that war. And so there was a policy that said, let us reward them for fighting for our nation and all that we hold sacred, and give them access to loans for home ownership. And the reality, however, of a well-intentioned plan is that it was not well-intentioned in the way it was implemented for a lot of people, in that Black veterans did not receive in equal measure those loans. And so whereas a whole population of people had public policy that was about federal investment on lifting people up, certain folks, and Black folks in particular, veterans, did not receive the benefit. So now look at the disparity that's created even by that. We look at the history of redlining. We look at the history of segregation. We remember what happened, I know we're going to talk about these urban plans and what that did to cut freeways across communities and limit their access to commerce. We look at what we've been dealing with as an administration around bias in home appraisals, even to this day, where it is well documented that when a Black family in certain places is trying to get an appraisal for their home, be it to get a second loan or to sell it, they're appraised at a lower value than a similarly situated white family. And so these are some of the areas that we are focused on through our economic policies. We've been dealing with student loan debt, understanding that, Black students are much more likely to take out a Pell Grant. We've seen an increase in tuition over the years, but the increase in Pell Grants has not been commensurate with that. We're working on that a bit. But student loan debt and the forgiveness of that as a way to allow people to have more assets that they can then put into buying a home or building a business. So these are some of the examples of what we've been doing. We've been focused on medical debt. Let me just add that. Medical debt can be one of the fastest ways that somebody can go bankrupt. And often that medical debt is accrued because of some medical emergency that someone or someone in their family has experienced that they didn't have the savings or the anticipation for. And we have now put in place a rule that is in the process of being implemented where we have required that medical debt cannot be a part of your credit score. And medical debt cannot be considered when your credit is being evaluated for a car loan, a home loan, things of that nature. So these are some examples of what we've been doing.
Yeah, I want to stay with that theme of access because it's a real issue. When we talk about access, especially communities of color, we've lacked it. A lot of it has been done for many reasons, but specifically, and you kind of alluded to it, urban renewal.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in knowing what work is being done to address some of these historic inequities.
So during the late 50s and 60s, there was this whole policy push, national policy push that was called urban renewal. But what it ended up doing was, and it was supposed to be about making life easier for people that live in the areas where it happened. But essentially it was about a policy that was directed in making it, many people will say, easier for folks who had wealth and means to move to the suburbs and still have access to downtown. I'm oversimplifying it, but that's essentially it. And you see across the country, I'm going to be in Detroit on this tour, I'm going to be in Milwaukee. As you all know, I'm from California, from the Bay Area. We saw it there, where these freeways were built, and basically to cut through communities which bifurcated the community so that folks couldn't have easy access to, let's say, the small businesses from where they lived. And it ended up decimating these communities for years. So what we have been doing through our infrastructure bill is putting resources into basically reconnecting communities. So here in Atlanta, for example, Freeway 75 and 85, what we are doing is dealing with the fact that I guess there was a division from Sweet Auburn from downtown, and what we need to do to reconnect by creating basically pathways that include over that pathway creating parks, but literally the infrastructure and recreating that infrastructure so we can reconnect communities. So here in Atlanta, there's going to be $158 million out of our infrastructure bill that will do that work, and it's going to create, we estimate, about 13,000 jobs, and also focus on affordable housing, which was one of the big issues that we're facing as a country.